should really not fear their governments. But with all these various UFO investigations going on, many researchers have told me that they fear aliens much less than their own tax-supported federal agents or so-called military intelligence officials.
In early 1990, 5 of my closest friends and I were in Las Vegas at the Silver Dollar Casino having cocktails and talking about what we'd been doing. It had been a year or so since we'd all got together. So one of the people in the group started talking about UFOs, which was almost humorous at first because there was a new resurgence of interest in UFOs that had been going on for a couple of years. So each of the 5 friends and myself had worked these black or top secret programs and pretty much had stayed on leading edge technology or the newest aerospace programs or avionics or test equipment or satellite communications programs. So we decided at that time that we would share any information that we had with each other that might lead to a better understanding of any reverse engineering of technology that could have come from alien craft. None of these people wanted me to record them. In fact, most were uncomfortable with me even taking notes. They were very paranoid that the government would retaliate or that they would lose their pensions if they were found divulging information about these black programs. But over a course of this 4-year period, I heard many stories of SR-71 pilots encountering Foo Fighters or plasma orbs when they're doing 3 times the speed of sound at altitudes of 80 or 90,000 feet up in the air. Pilots that had experienced UFOs coming alongside their aircraft and tracking them for long periods of time with extraordinary flight capabilities.
When you have experiences such as these, as we would call your own eyewitness accounts, your doubts and cynicism quickly evaporate. Several times we have seen these crafts flying in formation, parallel to one another, around each other, coming in and out and zooming into space. And I have talked to a number of both civilian and military pilots and professional people who have had exactly the same type of experiences, and you don't often hear them talk about it because we like to keep our jobs, and we are very cautious as to the type of information we portray so that we don't endanger our positions and our professions.
Although there seems to be no doubt that extraterrestrial spacecraft have been flying in our skies for 50 years, there's a persistent question of why all of the secrecy?
So the reason we get disinformation and information put into the public domain by the same people is so that those who don't have a need to know about the alien presence. I have seen evidence that suggests that alien liaison is real. That there are some factions within world government that are working on joint projects with aliens. The President Clinton cannot stand up before the public and say the same kind of things that I can say because he would cause too many of the third density of society to become upset.
If we want to be in our comfort zones, if we want to say in our egos that we are the elite race, that we are all that exist, we will continue to be stifled. If we can look at the fact that even in psychology, in a scientific arena, with the astronauts, with many of the military regimes, that there is something unique happening in our skies that is affecting us psychologically.
All I can say is fasten your seatbelts and stay tuned. It's obvious that we're out of normal times. That means changes in weather, increased earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, that sort of thing. And ultimately, it's leading up to nothing less than a pole shift. And when the poles shift, it all happens in less than a day. It happens in about 20 hours. And you've got continents moving at between 1,000 and 2,000 miles an hour. You've got surface winds of up to 1,000 miles an hour. Obviously, not much is going to survive that.
How can we stop this avalanche? A Nuclear Researchers magazine has already put the clock of doom forwards to 5 minutes before midnight. In the last century of the past millennium, we learned to walk on the moon. Was this a first desperate step to reach out, to get help from the life out there? Hopefully, we at least learned to look for the connection more intelligently than with a hapless message President Carter sent out with Voyager in 1977. Wake up, world, and get a grip on yourself. We need help.
Okay, Juhan, we have a satellite trace on our next location in Italy. Dr. Pinati from SETI. Juhan, are you there? Do you hear me? Juhan, are we clear for broadcast?
Yes, Dave. We are ready for Italy. I'm ready. Go ahead.
SETI was an official program of NASA's to study extraterrestrial activities. Suddenly, the funds were withdrawn. Dr. Pinati was part of that program 13 years ago. Dr. Pinati, what happened?
Well, of course, since most of the SETI scientists are technicians and have nothing to do with social sciences, it was important to involve in this study sociologists, psychologists, and other social scientists. My contribution was limited to outline this scenario in the light of the fact that surely people have had, in this case, to face a cultural shock. In fact, as world-famous psychologist Carl Gustav Jung already wrote in the 50s, the discovery of extraterrestrial beings would cause mankind to face a quite different situation.
So what if ET in fact discovered us?
In the case that we would be discovered by alien beings, we will be in the same situation of the African or the Oceanian cultures discovered by Europeans in the last 2 or 3 centuries. And this would cause a deep cultural shock and an enemy situation. Enemy means the destruction of the values of a civilization. In other words, there will be surely an authority crisis, in the sense that our leaders will no longer be considered as such, because we would apply to these newcomers as the new leaders, and will ask them the all possible questions to all possible problems. And in this case, of course, our culture as such will be castrated, since we would deny a lot of our values in order to keep the values of another civilization.
Okay, our satellite connection to Cape Kennedy is completed. Dr. Bernard Heisch, please come in. Please come in. Ready to broadcast?
Yes, Dave, all ready.
Good evening. So the big secret is no secret anymore. There is life out there. And why not? What's the logic in insisting that we would be the only intelligence in this myriad of thousands of billions of galaxies, many much, much bigger than our minuscule little solar one? Now is the time to soberly accept the fact that we are part of a bigger system, that man is in constant interaction with an immense universe, rich in intelligence and energy. In fact, we are only embarking upon the discovery of our own little microscopic galactic connection. Dr. Bernhard Heisch is a respected and acknowledged member of the mainstream scientific community, as in fact most of the people you will see on this program today. Still, Dr. Heisch insists that alien science belongs right up there with the other respected ones. Isn't that right, Dr. Heisch?
I myself am a professional scientist. I'm an astronomer, and I work in mainstream sciences, in investigations of the sun and the stars, mainly working on NASA programs. And some of my colleagues wonder, I'm sure, why I spend some of my time editing the Journal of Scientific Exploration. It's because there really needs to be a scientific outlet to investigate some of the things that we simply have to regard as the unknown.
Since science is the process for understanding truth, why is mainstream science so reluctant to accept unknown areas like extraterrestrial phenomena?
We have a certain mindset as scientists about what we regard as legitimate areas of investigation. And I'm afraid that in some cases we unfortunately overlook things that our mindset isn't prepared to think about. I sometimes tell the story of Galileo and his telescope. It's something that's well known to astronomers that around about 1610, Galileo took one of his first telescopes and pointed out the moons of Jupiter, the rings of Saturn, to some of the prominent cardinals of his day. And the cardinals, as it's well known, or at least it's said, refused to look through the telescope. And that is something that we now attribute to a closed mindset. And if I were lecturing now to a group of students as an astronomer, I would probably have them chuckle at the closed-mindedness of the prelates in refusing to look at the evidence that there were new things in the heavens.
But gradually some priests did peek into Galileo's telescope, isn't that right?
Back in those days, not only were the optics in very bad shape, and you really couldn't trust what you saw through a telescope, but in addition, it was believed that there were two different laws of nature, one that operated in the terrestrial realm and one in the celestial, and that you really couldn't trust your eyes as to what you might see through a telescope in your observations of something beyond the Earth.
Your parallel is fascinating, Dr. Heisch. What you're saying is that science refuses ET science the same way Galileo's hecklers did in their time, and that we will soon accept that truth the same way we accepted that the world is round.
But sometimes I think we find ourselves more in the following the footsteps of the prelates, which is to not look at phenomena because they don't fit into our preconceived notions of what's real and what's not real. We don't like to see evidence that we can't readily assimilate into what we conceive of as being the natural world.
So the Society of Scientific Exploration and its journal is open to discussions of unconventional ideas and phenomena, but also open to declare some of them as false and fraudulent. This way, Dr. Heisch is contributing to the credibility of ET studies. Reporting on a panel led by Dr. Peter Sturrock, Washington Post staff writer Kathy Sawyer agreed with the panel's findings to take UFO studies seriously. This article was published in Washington Post on June 28, 1998. Dr. Sturrock, you put the very foundation of physics in doubt. That is a very big challenge to mainstream science, isn't it?
Many of the topics that we consider and work on in the Society for Scientific Exploration really are challenges to some of the basic assumptions in modern-day science.
So some significant cosmic phenomena, like redshift, shake the very core of our understanding of physics. Are today's physicists too slow to react?
I believe that we need to question whether we do in fact know all the physics there is to know. When the question is posed in that way to most scientists and most astronomers, they readily admit, of course we do not know all the physics there is to know, or all the science there is to know. But then we can go on from there and next say, supposing there are new fundamental developments in physics to be discovered, comparable to the discovery of relativity by Einstein, or comparable to the discovery of quantum mechanics by Planck, Schrödinger, Heisenberg, and the other great scientists of the early 20th century. Supposing there are further great developments of that kind yet to be made, which will be essential for understanding all that happens in the universe.
One of the big questions facing astronomers today is whether there is enough matter in the galaxies to keep them connected and warm enough. If not, galaxies will expand. Matter, like the Earth, moves further away from the cores, further away from the sphere we can observe. Galaxies cool down and stray even further from each other. So-called luminous galaxies have only a few % of matter that forms the specific density. Astronomers try to study new substances like neutrons in laboratories here on the Earth. Other branches of science are studying the distribution of galaxies in the universe. Galaxies are not equally distributed. They appear in clusters, in groupings of different sizes. Why this irregular grouping, Dr. Sessler?
According to Einstein's theory of relativity and the cosmology which is derived from that theory of relativity, there's a critical matter density in the universe which will distinguish between the ever-expanding and universes and the universes which contract and eventually fall back. Astronomers so far have measured only about 10 or 20% of this matter. And we don't see even that amount of matter in terms of the luminous galaxies. And the matter which we cannot see directly from the luminosity of galaxies is called the dark matter. And it represents a rather mysterious component of the universe, which is just beginning to be explored.
So this is really like embarking on a new dimension of science. Which are the newest developments, Dr. Sturrock?
Our future developments in science may come about from addressing such anomalies and such issues. Furthermore, any fundamental development in physics, such as quantum mechanics, leads in time to new technologies.
Dr. Fredericks, you have a comment?
In the past 40 years, there has been, from the scientific side, an increasing amount of more direct evidence. For example, there are carbon-based chemistry. They're everywhere in the universe. So 40 years ago, we didn't know that. Now we know that.
So, Dr. Laszlo, there is life out there.
Given that there are so many planets, enormous number, they have to number them in the billions. Even if not all of them developed life, still I think a large number of them must have.
And you, Dr. Fredericks, agree, right?
I do believe that there is life analogous to our life elsewhere in the galaxy, in our galaxy, and in the universe. They will not look exactly like us and all that, but we are not alone. We are not unique in the universe. It would strike me as almost impossible that we should be unique in a sea of carbon chemistry.
So it is fair to say then that pioneer scientists, the Galileos of the 21st century, are slowly succeeding in lifting the veil of suspicion and cover-up and secrecy and revealing some of this truth. But how is it affecting some of the areas? Dr. Laszlo, for instance, how is it affecting the churches, religions, the dogmas?
As we have said, everything changes, evolves. Science does so, culture does, society evolves and changes. And I think so does religion. Now, what is religion? Exceptional individuals, who are the great prophets, have disclosed to us their vision of the world and of ourselves. This vision was then dogmatized, was put into a set of doctrines and dogmas. And churches, institutions have been founded on their basis and has only carried the word of the doctrine and not the spirit. I think we are living at a time when there's a need to renew the doctrines, to get back to the spirit of religion. Now we need insights, religious insights, that correspond to the reality of the 21st century.
Okay, we are approaching the Big Apple. We're coming into New York. New York, Dr. Mallow. Dr. Mallow, do you hear me? Do we have a trace? Do we have a line, Juhan? Do we have a line? We connected?
Yes. All clear.
How do aliens help science, Dr. Mallow?
People think of aliens. Where are they? Should we search for them with radio telescopes? Should we perhaps put more effort into finding out what is going on with the UFO phenomenon or the abduction phenomenon? I'm in favor of doing both of those things. I think one of the most important things for humanity is to prove conclusively, with evidence that everyone can believe, including scientists who now may have doubts, that we are not alone in the universe, that there are other civilizations. And in fact, if they really have come to visit us with alien craft, to prove that they are here and find out, above all, of course, what they are doing. I am convinced that an advanced civilization that would be visiting us would be aware of physics far beyond what we know now. But I also believe that when we contemplate very advanced civilizations, it is almost impossible for us to understand what their motives are or will be. That is why I think in these reports, if they do represent visitation of Earth, that we are having so much difficulty with this, because we do not understand at all why they are doing some of the things that they are said to be doing.
So this is what this TV program is all about. The truth that there is life out there. So why this frenetic denial? Why these billions and billions of dollars spent on a hysterical cover-up? Did the Earth become flat just because Galileo's peers denied his findings? Likewise, will the intruders disappear just because NASA says so? Now the plot thickens. Robert Dean, a U.S. Army officer retired after 27 years of service. Let's hear what he has to say.
When I left the military headquarters in 1964, we knew at that time of 4 separate groups that were coming and going and relating with us. One of those groups looked exactly like we do, and that bothered the NATO generals and admirals quite a bit. The fact that advanced extraterrestrial intelligence could be in our midst, looking exactly like we do, sitting among us, riding along in airplanes with us, sitting in restaurants or in theaters, and we wouldn't know. We would simply not know. That bothered the military planners a great deal. The United States military knew at that time that we were dealing with at least 12, if not more, separate extraterrestrial intelligences. In my 30 years of research and the knowledge that I've been able to pull out of military classified files has convinced me that something important and something terribly, terribly vast and important is taking place.
In 1963, Dean was commissioned to a town near Paris. That commission changed his life. It brought him right into the middle of the Cold War.
I had a top secret clearance at the time. And when I was arrived at the operations division, I was given an additional assignment working in the Supreme Headquarters Operations Center, a place we called SHOC. At that time, my top secret clearance was upgraded to cosmic top secret, which was and still is the highest level of security classification in NATO. And when I began my work in the Operations Center, I learned of a study that had been initiated there at NATO headquarters in 1961. What had happened was that we and the Soviets had almost gone to war with each other at least a half a dozen times for the wrong reasons. What was happening in the late 50s and 60s was that large numbers of circular metallic objects were flying all over Central Europe. They were generally flying in formation at a very high altitude. In formation at a very high altitude and a very high rate of speed. They would fly out of the Soviet sector over the Warsaw Pact area. In formation, very fast and very high. For a time, the Soviets thought these objects belonged to us. And for a time, we honestly thought they might belong to the Soviets. The reason it was so dangerous is that here we are in those years, facing each other across a divided Europe, with our fingers on the triggers, our thumbs poised above the red buttons, and World War III was only a moment away.
Dr. James Harder, tell us about the incident involving helicopters.
About 10 years ago, in the vicinity of Houston, Texas, two women and their grandson of one of them were driving in a somewhat lonely part of the countryside of Texas. And they saw coming towards them at a fairly low elevation what they looked to them like a oval UFO, a saucer-shaped UFO. It was emitting a good deal of heat, and as it turned out afterwards, probably a lot of radioactivity. But the most bizarre aspect of this case is the accompaniment of this saucer by 18 apparently American-made helicopters which served as kind of a convoy. It definitely looked like an American-made saucer of some kind. By the evidence that at least one person is known to have been a part of the security force on that convoy operation. We don't know why it was so low. It was probably involved in some kind of an accidental propulsion problem that drove them closer to the ground. But it was certainly a tragedy for these two women, one of whom apparently got enough radiation that she died later of cancer.
We are now roaming North Carolina. We're zooming in on Leah Haley. Hello, Leah Haley. Leah Haley. Ready for broadcast?
Yes, we are there.
Now follow me down some strange paths with Leah Haley.
What happened here was I was given an invitation, a personal invitation to go view one of our space shuttles. And I was told that I could bring my camera and take all the pictures of it I wanted, but I must not tell anyone that I was going. And I became very suspicious and, of course, did not go. But the next day in the paper, our local newspaper said that there were armed guards stationed around the area where I was supposed to have gone with authorization to use deadly force. I'm no longer afraid of them because I feel that they're just trying to learn about this phenomenon as I am.
Leah, you say you're not bitter, but what did the Army do to you?
I was at one point in time picked up and taken to one of our military bases and interrogated. There was also a man standing with them that had on a blue Air Force uniform. He seemed to be the one in charge, and he told me that they were picking me up because they wanted to make sure that I kept my mouth shut. As soon as I entered the room, I was given a shot in my right arm, and I was shoved into a chair, and I don't remember very much after that other than someone setting a tape recorder on the table and being told over and over and over again that I had not seen a spaceship. The men kept saying to me over and over, "You did not see a spaceship. Do you understand? You did not see a spaceship." And I don't remember much after that. I remembered arguing with them. I told them I knew what I'd seen. I knew what had happened to me. But it didn't do any good. I was just told to be quiet and listen.
Your strange encounters are fascinating, dreams or no dreams. Please tell us more.
I'll tell you what happened there anyway. I was taken aboard a craft, and I remembered looking out the porthole onto the ground below and ended up in an area that looked like another part of Earth. It looked as if we were in some sort of vacant field somewhere. It appeared to be extremely early morning before the sun was bright, and I was talking to a woman who with short brown hair. She looked like a woman, but I knew she was alien. And I remembered asking this woman, "Where are your people from?" And she said to me, "The Pleiades," but you already knew that.
Melinda Leslie claims she has been an abductee all her life. But one strange thing about her encounters with the aliens is that there has always been a human present in U.S. Armed Forces uniform at high security level, watching, observing, manipulating the interrogations. Listen to her recollection of one such incident.
Two large men in military dark camouflage outfits took my sheets off me. I'm woken up by them pulling the sheets back off my bed. And they pulled the sheets off. One of them had a dropper with a heavy, oily, very bitter substance on it. Put this up to my lips and dropped this heavy, oily substance into my lips. And the next thing I know, I'm lying on the ground, on the stretcher still, on the ground, next to some large type of aircraft. And they were shining a bright light in my face. And one of the guys leaned over, looked at me in the face, had a little tiny like pin light and was looking in my eyes and looked real closely in my eyes and said, "She's going," turned to the other guy and said, "She's a goner," like they were expecting me to pass out any second or something. But I was fully conscious and I thought, I'm not going anywhere, I'm fully conscious here. But I felt like I had been drugged. I did feel very groggy, although I remember and everything, I could tell that I was feeling very groggy. And then they picked me up and carried me on, and I saw this. I turned my head sideways, still laying on the stretchers. They're taking me onto this craft. It was a large black triangle. This was this large sloping black surface that went up at an angle and came to a point. It was not a round disc, and it was not any kind of standard plane. It appeared to me it was either like a huge flying wing design, or I believe from the angles, and I saw a point where it came down to a point that it was a large triangle. Next thing I know is I'm standing on a cold cement floor in an area that's completely darkly lit. They take me a couple feet down the tunnel, or a couple hundred feet down the tunnel. We go into two large doorways that are on the side, and we enter into like a small room. They pull one of the chairs out from the conference table, slide it out to the center of the floor, and they point at it and they say, "Sit." The other end of the room has a doorway. In through this doorway comes this guy with short red hair. He has captain's bars on his shoulders, and he walks up to me. He excuses the guards. The guards leave the room. So now it's just him and the guy in the lab coat.
The red-haired interrogator is real, says UFO expert Carla Turner. She knows of 5 abduction cases interrogated by the same red-haired Army captain. The mystery of abductions. Bud Hopkins recounts shocking stories told by abductees, in itself shocking, but the big question remains, why? In respect of the recent years' advancement in the cloning technology, is it inconceivable to think that aliens abduct people to clone them and thus control the Earth?
I've got numerous cases. In one case, another woman who was rather small physically found herself dressed again in one of these one-piece blue uniforms. She has no choice, she has no will, and she takes a very large man who's terrified. She takes him by the arm and takes him out of the car, and he seems to be unable to resist, and she moves him, this very small woman, moves him up the ramp and into the craft, where he is ultimately then stripped and examined by the UFO occupants. But this co-option process is, I think, central, again, it's at least a central piece to the abduction phenomenon. Very unpleasant one.
That's Carol. I won't.
Marvin Taylor encountered UFOs the first time when he was 11 years old. He has dedicated his life to UFOs since then. In 1993, he had a nose operation which convinced him that he was carrying an implant.
In 1993, after having an operation on my nose, separated septum, and believing that I had an implant, the laser treatment used for the separated septum surgery, I feel could have interfered with the workings of this implant, because 1 week after it, I had lost time in Central California 52 minutes on my first trip between 2 small towns, and an hour and 5 minutes the following week. These 2 lost time scenarios occurred at a point on the highway where once I passed out and came to while still in the car driving it, I was placed 20 miles to the south of the highway system that I had originated on.
Another loss of time occurred during a trip from Somora to Modesto.
These are grays that I was confronted with. And then behind the grays on this gurney were 3 taller individuals with dark clothing and a cloak-like type of fabric that went up over their heads. And they were just observing. The instruments that the aliens were using in my nose area, I believe, was being done in order to correct whatever problems that they were having with the implant that had been in my nose previously.
The author of the book Alien and the Scalpel, Dr. Roger Leir, explains about implants in humans. The book describes 8 operations, 8 objects taken from 8 different people and carefully analyzed.
The first surgical candidate was a female who had 2 objects which appeared on an X-ray that appeared to be ordinary objects that we use following foot surgery. So I suggested to him quite simply that the objects be removed and we could find out what they were and certainly solve the mystery. The first object that was removed from the toe of the lady was a T-shaped object like this, and then it was appeared to be a very dark gray, shiny in color, and covered with a very well-organized membrane or biological tissue, which you could not cut through, surprisingly, with a surgical blade. The second object removed from the toe was a small cantaloupe seed shaped and sized material, also covered with the same very dark, gray, shiny, well-organized membrane.
Neither the casing nor the matter of the objects are of this world. The surrounding tissue reveals strange things.
Now, first of all, the analysis of the tissue in the body that surrounded the objects was quite interesting, because it showed little nerve cells in very high numbers called nerve proprioceptors, and in an area of the fatty anatomy where these cells are non-existent. They don't belong. That was indeed a surprise. The second biggest surprise was that the soft tissue contained absolutely no evidence of an inflammatory response, which brings the question, how does one get a foreign object into the body and not have the body react to it with either inflammation or rejection? Well, as most of us know, this is relatively impossible. When you see this, let's say, in one individual and look at the statistics, you could conclude that this was a strange anomaly for one individual. When you see it from 2 individuals, then it gets a little bit stranger, but then when you see it in multiple individuals, the statistics become phenomenal, and it is extremely unusual and almost impossible. The next set of biological findings come from actually the membrane that surrounds the object itself. The membrane we found was composed of 3 materials which are a part of the natural systems of the body. And one is a collection of what is called a protein coagulum, which simply means that it's protein derived from clotted blood. And in this mass of protein, there are some dark brown granules, which are hemosiderin. This is an iron pigment, and this iron pigment then binds with oxygen, as does hemoglobin in red cells. And the third portion of this membrane is simply keratin, which is the outer layer of the skin. Now, any of these things are all common to the body, but there is no textbook, to my knowledge, that shows that there is an entity that has ever been removed from the human body that is composed of these 3 materials. And surprisingly enough, this membrane, when you try and cut through it in its living state or its fresh state, it's impossible to cut through.
The implants have been carefully scrutinized by prestigious labs. Some metallic samples are iron-based, but the steel is harder than anything on Earth. Some elements are similar to earthy ones, but the way they are configured is like nothing on Earth. Some labs report the similarity with the meteorites, hence not earthly objects. So now we tilt the globe and go down under to Australia. Mary Rodwell. Mary Rodwell, hello, hello. Juhan, are we connected?
We are ready, Dave.
The walls of Mary Rodwell's treatment room have borne witness to strange tales.
And so for me, this has been something that's become very much my mission, is to say to other colleagues and therapists in the mental health professionals, look, this isn't psychosis. This is a real experience. I know it's real, and I have enough evidence now to show you that it's real. And I was actually doing advanced counselling at an institute in Perth, and I took one of my clients' case study in supervision to a whole group of professionals. One of them was actually a uniting minister of all things. And I spent the next hour saying, these are all the things that are happening to this person. These are all the hypotheses, from mental illness right to paranormal experience to the abductee experience. What do you think? What do you know of this? And what I found was that nobody knew about this. I was educating them. And interestingly, the uniting minister, he never said a word. He didn't give me any information about what he would believe from a theological point of view. I found that very fascinating. But for me, I found that I was the only one amongst that group of 20 people that had any understanding, and these are people within the mental health professional. You know, these are the ones that actually are there for people with a whole range of issues, and yet they didn't know about this experience. So I knew that I had to do my own research and had to find out more about this for myself, because psychology at the moment does not recognize this. Even though I know, and many other people know now, that Bud Hopkins is saying, and John Mack is saying, 5% of Americans, that's the tip of the iceberg. We're hearing 6 to 8 million perhaps in America. That may be the tip of the iceberg. We may be looking, and I believe we're looking at millions and millions of people with this experience and being in total isolation with this because they cannot talk about it, because society as yet says this isn't part of reality. Society from religion says this is not part of our reality. Science says this is not part of our reality. So where do people go? Where do people go?
Not so well. Actually, I think we did well. It had a In our next episode, we will continue to explore some of the things the aliens are already doing here on Earth, and why. Why the mutilations? Why the cloning of humans? Why the abductions of fetuses, the implants, and so on. We will also shed some new and shocking light on the mystery of the assassination of President Kennedy, as well as review some of his remarks about UFOs. In fact, we're going to shake the very foundations of Darwinism and physics as we know them today. And we will also show how Pentagon is spending enormous, or shoving enormous amounts of money, millions and millions of dollars of ET technology research under a carpet they call the Black Program. So make sure you watch soon on this channel. By the way, as I'm driving away, I keep wondering why I'm using fossil fuel when I could be getting 50,000 miles on just 2 gallons of water, using cold fusion, a technique well within reach, probably derived from ET technology, in other words, created somewhere there among the stars. Goodbye.